He wasn't meant to remember. A Navy SEAL erased from the record, carrying a past buried under silence, and a German Shepherd marked unstable, scheduled to disappear. When they faced each other, there was no command, no fear, only recognition. The dog didn't lunge. He sat as if he'd been waiting. What followed wasn't training. It was truth resurfacing. This is a story about loyalty, betrayal, and a bond the system tried to erase. Where are you watching from? Comment your city. If you believe second chances matter, share this and subscribe. Snow had been falling over Silver Pine Valley, Montana for 3 days without pause. Thick, steady flakes that softened the mountains and muted the world. Pines bowed beneath the weight, rooftops vanished into pale gray, and the narrow road winding into town felt less like an arrival than a quiet retreat. Winter here did not rage. It endured. Logan Hale reached the town limits just before dusk. He parked beneath a tired street lamp whose light scattered across the snow in uneven halos. One of many small distortions his eyes still produced. The doctors called it partial optic damage, stable but unpredictable. Logan simply called it Syria, still lingering behind his vision no matter how far he traveled. At 29, Logan was young for a Navy SEAL, though the years had already settled into him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, lean rather than bulky, built by routine and restraint. His dark hair was cropped short, his face clean-shaven, his expression composed to the point of seeming distant. The calm was practiced. Underneath lived restless nights, sudden flashes of sound, and a pressure in his chest that arrived without warning. The extended leave had not been a suggestion. Command called it recovery. Logan understood it as removal. Temporary, quiet, convenient. The Silver Pine K-9 Rehabilitation Center sat beyond the last row of houses, pressed against the forest where cell service weakened and silence grew heavier. The building was functional but worn, concrete walls dulled by time and snow, fencing patched and repatched. It looked like a place designed for holding patterns, not futures. Inside the outer yard, a German Shepherd moved with rigid precision along the length of a kennel. His claws clicked against frozen concrete in a steady rhythm, back and forth, never rushing, never stopping. A scratched metal plate bore a single name: Ranger. He was larger than average, powerfully built, his sable and black coat thick against the cold. One ear stood upright, the other bent slightly, shaped by an old injury. A pale scar crossed his muzzle, cutting cleanly through dark fur. His amber eyes tracked everything: movement, sound, breath, with a focus that felt trained rather than feral. Ranger had been classified as extreme risk. 3 bites in 6 weeks. 1 handler hospitalized. No trainer willing to enter the kennel again. The final recommendation sat unsigned, but ready. Logan had not read the report yet. He was still at the front desk when Emily Dawson hurried toward him, nearly dropping the files she carried. She was young, mid-20s, tall and athletic, her posture straight despite obvious fatigue. Her brown hair was pulled back into a tight bun that had loosened with the day's work, and her eyes were sharp, alert, and searching. She wore her uniform like someone who took the responsibility seriously, even when the institution did not return the favor. "You're Logan Hale," she said, steadying herself. "I'm Officer Emily Dawson, K-9 Unit." Her handshake was firm, practiced, and quick. Emily had grown up around working dogs, trained alongside them from an early age, and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who trusted observation more than authority. "I'm just visiting," Logan replied evenly. "Medical leave." Emily nodded once. "That's how everyone ends up here lately." She led him down a narrow corridor that smelled faintly of disinfectant and cold air. As they walked, she explained the state of the center: reduced funding, shrinking staff, pressure from above to clear space and cut costs. Dogs were being transferred out, contracts reviewed, futures decided by spreadsheets rather than assessments. One name surfaced repeatedly: Lieutenant Mark Vance. Vance stood near the yard doors when they arrived. He was in his early 40s, clean-cut and sharply uniformed, his posture rigid and controlled. His face was narrow, his eyes cool and evaluative, the kind that measured outcomes rather than people. He carried authority easily and empathy rarely. "Hail," Vance said, offering a nod that stopped short of respect. "Didn't expect a SEAL on my doorstep." "They sent me north," Logan answered simply. This was on the route. Vance's gaze flicked briefly to Logan's eyes, then away. "This isn't a therapy center. These dogs are unstable." "They're injured," Emily said quietly, without looking at him. Vance ignored her. "We're closing this facility. Ranger's case is the worst of the lot. Liability like that gets people killed." Emily's jaw tightened. "He hasn't been given a fair evaluation." "He's had 3 chances," Vance replied flatly. "That's more than enough." Logan followed Vance's line of sight into the yard. For a moment, his vision blurred. Snow, fencing, movement blending together. Then it sharpened. Ranger had stopped pacing. The dog stood motionless at the front of the kennel, body squared, head level. No barking, no growling. His attention was fixed entirely on Logan. Logan felt a faint pressure behind his eyes, not pain, but awareness, like a door nudged from the other side. He stepped closer without realizing it, boots crunching softly on snow. Emily inhaled sharply, ready to stop him, but she didn't move. Ranger's posture shifted, not aggression, not submission, attention, clean and deliberate. Logan stopped just outside the chain-link fence. He didn't raise his hands, didn't speak. He simply stood there, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady, snow drifting down between them. Ranger held his gaze. Then, slowly, deliberately, the German Shepherd sat. No sound broke the air. No tension snapped. Just stillness, heavy and undeniable. The yard seemed to pause around them. Emily felt it, the wrongness of the moment, not in fear, but in recognition. She had watched Ranger react to uniforms, to commands, to movement. This was none of those things. Vance scoffed, breaking the silence. Coincidence. But Logan couldn't look away. His chest tightened, not with panic, but with something quieter, deeper, a sense of familiarity stripped of memory. "I don't think he's dangerous," Logan said softly. Emily turned toward him, eyes wide with something close to hope. Vance's expression hardened. "You saw one moment." "I've seen weeks," Emily said, her voice controlled but firm. "And this isn't aggression, it's orientation. He's looking for something." Ranger remained seated, eyes locked on Logan as if anchored there by instinct rather than command. Snow continued to fall over Silver Pine Valley, settling onto fencing, roofs, shoulders. Somewhere beyond the trees, winter pressed inward. And inside a forgotten kennel, a dog waited. Calm, patient, as though something long lost had finally stepped back into view. Morning settled hard over Silver Pine Valley, the cold sharp enough to sting lungs. Inside the K9 Rehabilitation Center, the indoor training enclosure smelled of rubber mats, disinfectant, and damp fur. Fluorescent lights hummed above reinforced concrete walls, their glare reflecting off steel fixtures and the mesh of safety partitions. 4 handlers stood behind the barrier, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the gate. Ranger entered the enclosure already wound tight. His shoulders rode high, tail stiff, amber eyes darting from corner to corner as if measuring threats that weren't there. A metal cart rattled somewhere down the hall. The sound snapped through him like a wire pulled too hard. He lunged. The first handler barely got the gate shut in time. Ranger slammed into the mesh, teeth bared, a low roar vibrating through his chest. The room filled with sharp shouts and the scrape of boots as people backed away. The noise fed him, metal clanging, voices overlapping, fear moving too fast to be contained. Emily Dawson watched from the observation booth, fingers white on the railing. She knew the signs. This wasn't aggression seeking dominance. This was panic, unfiltered, directionless. She reached for the release switch, then hesitated. If Ranger broke through again, the recommendation would be immediate. No more delays. Logan Hale stood alone on the far side of the enclosure, having entered quietly while attention focused on the gate. He wore no padding, no protective sleeve. His hands were empty. The echoes inside his skull were louder than the room, the ringing pressure that came when sounds stacked too quickly. He planted his feet and breathed. Ranger spun, locking onto him. For a fraction of a second, the world narrowed to that line of sight. The dog's muscles coiled, weight shifting forward. Emily opened her mouth to shout. Logan didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. The word came out of him before he could think it through. Soft, clipped, shaped by a place he couldn't name. Sits. The syllable landed cleanly, almost gentle. Ranger froze mid-step. His chest heaved once, twice. The snarl collapsed into silence, slowly. So slowly it felt unreal. He lowered his hindquarters and sat, head high, eyes fixed on Logan as if awaiting the next instruction. The room went dead quiet. Emily felt her breath release all at once. Behind the glass, Officer Paul Reddick, a broad-shouldered handler in his mid-30s with a shaved head and wary eyes, muttered, "What the hell?" Logan's heart hammered. He stared at Ranger, at the dog's steady posture, and tried to understand what he'd just done. He didn't speak German. He hadn't trained K-9s. The word felt old in his mouth, like a key pulled from a pocket he didn't remember sewing. Ranger remained seated, not subdued, oriented. Emily hit the emergency pause and opened the enclosure door just enough to step in. She moved slowly, palms open, keeping her body angled away from Ranger's line of sight. The dog didn't track her. He tracked Logan. "We're done," she said quietly. "Stand down." Logan exhaled, the pressure behind his eyes ebbing. Ranger's ears flicked once, then settled. He stayed where he was. Later, in the small break room that doubled as an office, coffee steamed in paper cups no one touched. Emily replayed the camera feed on a tablet, scrubbing back and forth as if the truth might change if she watched it differently. It didn't. "You didn't command him," she said, finally. "You anchored him." Logan shook his head. "I don't know why that word came out." She studied his face, the calm that sat too carefully, the faint strain around his eyes. "Sometimes memory doesn't live where we expect it." Across the building, Lieutenant Mark Vance took a call in his office. He shut the door and lowered his voice. The man on the other end spoke first, clipped and practiced, the sound of distance wrapped in authority. "You're to observe the seal," the voice said. "Document every interaction, no exceptions." Vance glanced through the window toward the yard. "He's just visiting." "Not anymore." The line went dead. Vance stared at his phone a moment longer than necessary, then slid it into his pocket. His jaw tightened. Problems had a way of multiplying when left uncontained. In the kennel wing, Ranger lay on his side, finally still. Emily knelt outside the fence, close enough to feel his breath. She slipped a handheld scanner over the microchip reader and frowned when the data populated. Timestamps overlapped. Entry dates didn't align. Fields that should have been locked showed signs of manual overwrite. She ran the scan again. Same result. "This isn't sloppy," she murmured. "It's deliberate." Logan slept poorly that night in the small room provided for visitors. Snow pressed against the window, turning darkness into a dim, constant glow. When sleep came, it dragged sound with it. A child crying, concrete dust in the air, a corridor lit by emergency lamps. his boots slipping on rubble. Then the blast, near enough to knock breath from his lungs without taking him apart. He reached forward, shouting for someone he couldn't see. A shape moved through smoke. Low, fast, purposeful. Something struck him from the side, hard, knocking him clear as heat tore through the space he'd occupied. He woke with a start, hand clenched, pulse racing. The image dissolved before a face could form. Only the sound remained, the cry fading. At dawn, Logan found Emily in the records room, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, eyes narrowed at a monitor. She looked up as he entered, searching his expression. "Your word," she said. "German." "I don't remember learning it." She nodded once. "Ranger does?" From the hall came the measured footsteps of Lieutenant Vance. He paused at the doorway, posture composed, eyes unreadable. "We'll be increasing oversight," he said, "for everyone's safety." Emily met his gaze without blinking. "Safety cuts both ways." Vance smiled thinly and left. In the kennel, Ranger rose as Logan approached. No pacing, no tension. He sat again, unprompted. Logan stood there, snowlight washing through the windows, and felt the weight of something pressing close. Familiar, unfinished, waiting. Snow fell lightly through the afternoon, thin flakes drifting past the narrow windows of the records room. The heater rattled, struggling against the cold that seeped through concrete walls. Emily Dawson sat hunched at a metal desk, sleeves rolled to her elbows, eyes fixed on a monitor that hadn't been updated in years. Dust coated the keyboard. The database she'd opened was buried 2 layers deep, the kind of archive most people forgot existed. She typed slowly, deliberately, following a thread she hadn't meant to find. A folder opened with a warning banner and lines of redaction so heavy they looked like scars. The header read, "Operation Frost Meridian." Below it, a casualty summary listed a SEAL element and 1 K9 asset, all marked KIA. Emily's breath caught. She scrolled. A single line had escaped the black bars. Handler, H7, Dog, RZ17, Valor. Emily leaned back, heart pounding. Valor. The name didn't appear anywhere else in the center's system. She pulled up Ranger's intake file and cross-checked the microchip data she'd scanned earlier. Serial ranges overlapped. Dates aligned too cleanly to be coincidence. The dog labeled Ranger wasn't a failed domestic K9. He was Valor. And if Valor had a handler... Emily opened another window, this one tied to military personnel records. Most entries returned nothing. One profile, however, had been wiped so thoroughly it left an outline where information should have been. H7. The absence screamed louder than any data. Someone had taken time to erase it. Logan Hale stood in the corridor outside, staring through the glass at Ranger's kennel. The dog rested on his chest, head lifted, eyes following Logan with a quiet steadiness that bordered on reverence. Logan felt the pressure again behind his eyes, not pain, but insistence. The dreams had sharpened during daylight, fragments slipping in when he wasn't ready. Concrete dust. A radio crackling, a shout cut short. He pressed his palm to the glass, grounding himself. In his mind, the corridor widened, filled with smoke. He moved without thinking, dragged by urgency he couldn't place. Then the second blast. Closer, hotter. A shape hit him hard, driving him sideways. He remembered the impact, the roll, the heat tearing past where he'd been standing. Someone had moved him, someone low, fast, and unafraid. Emily stepped into the hallway, face pale but set. "We need to talk," she said. They went back to the records room. Emily turned the monitor so Logan could see the header. She watched his face as the words registered. He didn't speak. His jaw tightened. His breathing slowed. "Valor?" he said quietly, as if tasting it. The name slid into place with a click he felt more than heard. She nodded. RZ-17, listed as killed, handler H7. She hesitated, then met his eyes. That handler was you? Logan closed his eyes. The room tilted. He gripped the edge of the desk until the pressure eased. They erased me, he said, not as a question. They erased the record, Emily replied. Not the truth. Images pushed through, clearer now, the pullback order, the coordinates, the choice. He saw himself turning back when the others moved out, saw Valor at his side, muscles coiled, waiting. He heard the child crying. He felt the second blast bloom behind him. Valor moved first, Logan said. He knocked me clear. Emily swallowed. The report says the unit withdrew early. No secondary sweep. Logan's eyes opened, hard and steady. They left him. Across town, in a private office above a closed diner, Lieutenant Mark Vance sat across from Colonel Franklin Dwyer. Dwyer was in his late 50s, tall and spare, his gray hair cut close to the scalp. His uniform jacket lay folded on the table beside a steaming mug he hadn't touched. His face was lined not with age, but with habit, the practiced control of someone used to shaping outcomes. "The dog is still there," Vance said, keeping his voice low. Dwyer's eyes flicked toward the window, then back. "It shouldn't be?" "An officer is interfering." Dwyer's mouth thinned. "A SEAL on medical leave." Vance hesitated. "He's connected." Dwyer leaned forward, forearms on the table. "That asset never existed on paper. If it resurfaces, questions follow. You don't want those." "What do you want done?" Vance asked. "Recovery," Dwyer said evenly, quietly. "And if recovery fails, termination." Vance nodded once. "And my position?" Dwyer's gaze held. "There's room for advancement for officers who understand containment." They stood. The meeting ended without handshakes. Emily returned to the corridor just as voices drifted from around the corner. She froze, heart racing, and stepped back into the shadow of a storage alcove. Vance's voice carried, controlled, and precise. Dwyer's tone followed, clipped, unmistakable. "Move fast," Dwyer was saying. "No delays." "I'll monitor every interaction," Vance replied. "The SEAL won't know." Emily waited until footsteps faded, then exhaled shakily. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of the open file on her screen. Proof mattered now. She found Logan in the yard again. Ranger rose as Logan approached, then sat, posture perfect, eyes intent. Emily felt the weight of it, the loyalty, the patience, the waiting. "They know," she said quietly, "and they're coming." Logan looked down at Ranger, then back at her. The snow thickened, blurring the fence, the trees, the world beyond the center. His voice was steady when he spoke. "Then we stop being quiet." Ranger's tail thumped once against the concrete, a soft, resolute sound. The storm arrived without warning, as mountain storms often did. Wind first, then snow so thick it swallowed sound. By the time the facility lights dimmed for the night, Silver Pine Valley had vanished into white. Drifts piled against fences. Pines bowed low, their branches cracking softly under weight. Emily Dawson felt it before she saw it. The unease, the shift. She stood in the equipment corridor tugging on her jacket when headlights flared beyond the outer gate. Two dark vehicles idling with engines that did not belong to the town. No logos, no sirens, just presence. She moved fast. Logan Hale was in the kennel wing, checking Ranger's harness with practiced hands he didn't remember learning. Ranger stood close, body calm but alert, breath steady, ears angled toward the wind. When Emily reached them, her voice was low and clipped. "They're here," she said. "Not local." Logan's jaw set. He didn't ask how she knew. He slid the harness into place and met Ranger's eyes. The dog leaned into him, a familiar weight that steadied the world. They slipped out through the service door as the first shout carried across the yard. Boots crunched. A beam of light cut through the snow, hard and white, sweeping the fence line. Emily led them along the tree line, then down into the forest where the storm thickened and the ground dropped away. The woods closed around them. Snow drove sideways, needling exposed skin. Branches snapped underfoot. Somewhere behind them, voices barked orders, tight, trained, impatient. Flashlights pierced the dark in brief, blinding arcs. Ranger took the lead. He moved with purpose, choosing paths that bent away from open ground, weaving between trunks with a confidence that wasn't learned here. Logan followed, breath burning his lungs, vision wavering as the world became contrast and motion. Emily kept pace, compact and determined, her boots finding purchase where none should exist. A shot cracked the night. It wasn't close enough to echo, it was close enough to tear air. Snow burst from a tree to their right. Ranger spun back, body angling instinctively between Logan and the sound. Another shot followed, this one grazing, a hiss and a thud. Ranger yelped once. Logan stumbled as the dog pressed into him, momentum knocking them both into the snow. Logan's hands found fur slick with warmth. Blood, his chest seized. "Valor," he breathed, the name tearing free without thought. "Stay." The word landed with the same weight as the first command had. Ranger froze, then lowered himself into the snow, chest heaving, eyes locked on Logan. The forest seemed to hold. Emily crouched, ripping open a field dressing with shaking fingers. The wound was shallow, a line across muscle, bleeding but not catastrophic. Ranger didn't move as she worked, teeth clenched, breath steaming. Behind them, footsteps faltered. Flashlights swept past, missing the dip in terrain by feet. The storm swallowed sound again. They waited until the lights faded, until the voices thinned and scattered. Emily pressed her forehead to Ranger's neck for a moment she didn't acknowledge. Then she stood. "We move. Now." They pushed deeper into the forest, following a narrow ravine where snow collected thick and sound died. Logan's legs burned, his head rang, images intruded. Concrete walls, a radio crackle, a pullback order shouted too late. He shook them off and kept moving. They reached a stand of rock outcrops just before dawn, wind howling overhead. Emily dug into her pack and pulled out a small USB drive wrapped in tape. Her hands were steady now, eyes bright with something between fear and resolve. "I found this in the old storage locker," she said, voice nearly lost to the wind. "From before the system upgrade, audio logs." She plugged it into a battered tablet, shielding the screen with her body. The file opened. Static hissed, then a voice cut through, calm, clipped, unmistakable. Logan's. He heard himself issue commands in German, precise and controlled. Heard a soft acknowledgement. Heard the world shake and his own voice harden, pushing forward, refusing to leave. He staggered back as if struck. Emily watched his face as recognition settled, heavy and complete. "They erased it," she said quietly. "Your file, your memory, after the mission went wrong." Logan swallowed. The truth assembled itself without mercy. The pullback. The decision to turn back. Valor's weight slamming into him as fire tore through space that would have killed him. The silence afterward, the lie written clean across records. "They needed someone to carry it," Emily continued. "So they made it you." Ranger pressed close, warm and solid. Logan rested his forehead against the dog's, snow melting between them. His voice shook once, then steadied. "We don't run anymore." From the ridge, engines growled. Closer now. Shadows moved against the white. Emily snapped the tablet shut and tucked the drive into her jacket. "Then we make sure the truth outruns them," she said. Ranger lifted his head, ears forward, pain forgotten in purpose. The storm surged, hiding them again, as the mountain swallowed sound, and the night bent around three figures who refused to disappear. Snow fell gently over Silver Pine Valley, softer now, as if the mountain had decided to listen. The administrative building at the town center stood lit against the gray morning, its stone steps crowded with people who had arrived early and stayed longer than planned. Cameras perched on tripods, microphones clustered like winter birds. The air carried the bite of cold and the charge of expectation. Logan Hale stepped forward with Ranger at his side. The dog moved with a calm that drew eyes. Head high, gait steady, the faint line of healing visible beneath his coat. Emily Dawson walked just behind them, shoulders squared, a folder pressed to her chest. She wore a dark jacket dusted with snow, hair pulled back, eyes clear and resolute. A local reporter named Marianne Keller broke from the crowd first. She was in her 40s, sharp-featured, with steel-gray hair cut to her jaw and a voice that didn't waver when asking hard questions. "Mr. Hale," she said, lifting her microphone. "Why today?" Logan looked past the cameras to the building doors, then back. "Because silence keeps hurting people," he said, "and because the truth doesn't get warmer if you wait." Inside, the hearing room filled quickly. Town officials took their seats. Military observers sat stiff-backed in uniform. At the far table, Colonel Franklin Dwyer entered flanked by counsel, posture rigid, expression practiced into neutrality. Lieutenant Mark Vance followed, jaw tight, eyes avoiding the crowd. A judge with a measured presence. Judge Eleanor Whitcomb, late 50s, silver hair pinned neatly, gaze steady, called the room to order. Emily stood when her name was called. She laid out the evidence with care, the redacted files, the serial overlap, the intake discrepancies, the overwritten dates. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. When the audio played, Logan's voice issuing commands in German, precise and unmistakable. Heads turned. When video followed, grainy but clear, showing a Ranger driving Logan clear of a blast zone. Breaths held. Logan testified next. He spoke of Operation Frost Meridian without embellishment, of the pullback order, of hearing a child cry, of turning back, of being struck aside as fire tore through the space he'd occupied. He described waking to silence and paperwork that declared a different story. "They erased my record to erase their choice," he said. "They left my partner to make the math work." Ranger lay at his feet, still as stone, eyes upturned. Dwyer's counsel objected. Judge Whitcomb overruled. When Dwyer took the stand, his answers were clipped, rehearsed. He spoke of protocol and risk. When pressed about altered files, his composure thinned. Vance's testimony unraveled faster. Financial records surfaced. Payments routed through a contractor tied to the shuttering of the K-9 Center. Emails showed directives to accelerate asset disposal. His voice faltered. The room felt the turn. By afternoon, the decision moved from hearing to indictment. Military investigators announced a formal inquiry. The town murmured, then fell quiet as Judge Whitcomb read the findings. Colonel Franklin Dwyer was found guilty of concealing civilian casualties, falsifying operational records, and destroying evidence. Sentence: 12 years in federal prison, dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of rank and pension. Lieutenant Mark Vance was found guilty of conspiracy, bribery, and unlawful authorization of K-9 destruction. Sentence: 4 years in federal prison, dismissal from service, permanent ban from government contracting. The words settled like snow. Final, unmistakable. Outside, the valley exhaled. Cameras followed Logan as he stepped into daylight. Marianne Keller lowered her microphone. "What now?" she asked. Logan glanced at Ranger, then at Emily. "Repair," he said. Weeks later, a hand-carved sign went up on the edge of town. Silver Pine Haven. The building was modest. 2 wings, a fenced yard, warm light in winter. Emily managed intake with practiced compassion. Logan trained quietly, hands sure. voice calm. Ranger, valor. Moved among the kennels with patience, demonstrating trust more than technique. Dogs watched him. They followed. The town gathered on a clear afternoon for a small ceremony. Children bundled in coats clapped as Valor received a new vest stitched with gold thread. K9 combat veteran. Logan accepted a medal with a nod, eyes bright, shoulders finally unburdened. As the sun dipped, Logan tossed a snow-packed ball across the yard. Valor sprinted, carving a clean line through white, then returned it with a soft huff. Emily laughed, breath clouding in the cold, and the sound rang like a promise kept. Winter held Silverpine Valley in a gentler grip. The truth had passed through, leaving room to breathe. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought on the front lines, but in the quiet moments after, when the world has moved on, yet the wounds remain. This story reminds us that truth may be buried, loyalty may be tested, and memories may be taken, but integrity has a way of finding its voice. In everyday life, we all face moments where staying silent feels easier than standing up. But healing begins when someone chooses courage over comfort, when we refuse to abandon those who stood beside us, whether they walk on 2 legs or 4. Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about owning it, learning from it, and choosing to do better. If this story touched you, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Leave a comment and tell us what moment stayed with you the most. And if you want more stories about loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.